Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Written Undead podcast. I am Richard R. Rose, and with me is Jack Childress, Dungeondan Uebel, and today we have a very special guest returning to the show, ladies and gentlemen, the author of the Undead, Adrian's Undead Diary series, and several other crazy stuff that haven't read all of yet, but I'm sure it's just as awesome. Chris Philbrook, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey everybody.
So, man,
Promptly
what have you
at
been
2
doing?
o'clock, too. That's really good.
Yes, sir. We try to always stay on time when we can. So,
Nice.
what are you currently working on right now? Because we're going to get into all the stuff you've already got out there. But I just wonder, what are you doing today?
So back on Halloween, the 13th book of AUD dropped. And it ends on a pretty tough cliffhanger, I guess you'd say. A lot of stuff kind of goes a little haywire towards the second half of the book, and I knew that if I left the series like that, people were going to be going mental. So as soon as I finished 13, I just rolled right straight into 14. So people could get closure on what was going on a little faster.
So the end of that thing was, goodness.
Yeah.
But now the thing that I found also was so great about it was that we finally got Lockie and Adrian in the same place.
Yeah.
And that was cool. Which, like, here I've got Lockie over here and I got Adrian over here. So they're in the same place in this form. But, dude, that was so neat. And to have the two narrators, good
stuff.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
It was a bit of a logistical clusterfuck. Getting everybody on board and just basically saying, like, what are the timelines? When do we need to have what? And, some things had to be written out of order, and making sure that, I had the book about a third written when the idea of bringing Lockie in really solidified as a good idea, right? And I got Carl on the phone and I was like, all right, look, here's my dream, but in order for this to happen, I need you to write your section now. But I don't know what's going on.
Yep.
So I just need you to write a section where they meet, and we just went back and forth and hashed out a couple of details, and I knew the moment of handoff, when the two would meet, I kind of knew what that would look like, and he just wrote his section, and I wrote the story to match what he wrote. So when I finally caught up to his section, it was ready. We had to do that because Danielle, the narrator for Lockie, is booked out 6 months.
Wow.
So she does a ton of romance and historical fantasy and stuff like that. So, I gave her a ring and was like, so I need you to read about 15,000 words. When can you fit that in? And 15,000 words is maybe 2 days of work for her.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, oh, I've got an opening in 10 days. So then I was like, hey, Carl, you got 10 days.
No pressure.
Eight really, because I've got to get it, edit it, send it back. You've got to final, sign off, and then I got to send it to her. And it all just came together. And it's a really fun part of the story.
Well, let me ask you something. You said that. Now, do you have your narrator record the book as you're writing it, or do
no?
Okay.
Too many changes happen after the fact. Midstream. So a lot of times, you'll get 3/4 of the way through a book and you realize, hey, that scene that I have at the beginning doesn't really make sense as much anymore. I need to change it to this. Or, for me, a lot of what happens, AUD has this strong undercurrent of logistics where the things they have are limited. The supplies are limited for many things. And sometimes I'll have something not be a problem, and then I'll get later in the book and I want it to be a problem because it'll make the story better. So then I got to go back to the beginning and change, how many things they got, or change what happens, or insert a scene where they lose some or use some, or, whatever it is. So I can't have him record. It's way more work for him to go back and do pickup, they call it, and then fix an already, narrated chapter. So I try to finish it and then, go through the editing process as it is, and then, humping it off to him for him to record.
Okay, that's what I do too. But you mentioned her, ready to do it, and okay, you got 15 days to write this, and I just wonder if that's somehow there's a way to record as you go along. But I mean, there's no way I could do that.
Yeah, I couldn't. Not. I mean, I think there are people who do it that way, but no.
Seems like for the narrator, doing something like that would be annoying. Like, just finish the thing and then I'll do it, because
Right.
like you said, if they got to keep going back, it's like, dude, I just read that like 3 days ago. What the hell?
Yep.
So,
well, they have to go back and fix stuff, enough as it is during the actual recording process, even when the book is completely finished. Because you have to go back and give them feedback, and look when you listen to the each chapter and everything. And
yep.
Well, like what happened with the Ruger Reward when Brain Freeze narrator read that.
No, Steve.
Yes, Steve Vernon.
Yeah.
He had to go back and redo the Rugeroo's voices because he didn't make them sound like they were from Louisiana.
Right.
So little things like that. So now, have you ran into that, Chris, where you create a new character and you hand it off to the narrator and he reads it and you're like, I didn't really hear him sounding like that, and had to go like, well, could you make him sound like this?
I try when I hand off a script to the narrator, if there are certain characters that I have like dead set impressions of in my head, I try to hand off like reading notes.
Okay.
So, if a certain character has a certain accent or is from a certain part of the world, here's the script and here are some notes. And, the best narrators take those notes and then they prep. They read through the book, they take notes, they highlight, they do whatever they've got to do to keep it organized. And sometimes it's easy to forget where, somebody is supposed to be, Spanish or whatever, or German or whatever, and they're supposed to have at least a little bit of an accent, and it just gets missed. And sometimes I miss it because, in a story that's got so many characters, I'm proofing it and like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And then after the fact, it's like, oh, okay. All right. Hey, can we fix this? Is it too late? And it's never too late with audio, because they can always go back and fix that file and do a pickup and then load that one chapter. And Audible will push out the fix. So,
is that an additional cost when you have to go back and redo a little bit?
Usually, one price? No. Usually, no. I haven't had a narrator charge me for a fix like that yet. But I'm sure that there are narrators who would or who have to.
Oh, Anthony Castro, good comment. Fairly true comment. AUD is the greatest zombie series on the planet.
Thank you.
Almost argue the universe.
We don't know. There are a lot of planets out there.
There could be like 10 or 12 other Chris Philbrooks out there too.
Lord help us.
Well, let's transition just a little bit. Richard had brought something up to me that I didn't realize, and I guess you to confirm it and give me a little more into it. As I've been writing my little bloody Bigfoot story, it's kind of taken on a life of its own. And as Richard's been editing it, he's pointed out that what I've written really could be the first quarter of a full-length book instead of something shorter, which is what I was going for. And he brought up Diggory Finch. Did you write that as like a short story, like for an anthology or something, and then went, hey, I can run with this? What's the backstory on Diggory?
Diggory from the concept was going to be a series. I have had stuff though that has started out as like a novella that very clearly had more legs than I thought, and it grows into something else, like The Bleed that I did with Mark Tufo and Dave Moody. The Bleed just started out as like a little throwaway kind of short story that I wrote for fun one day. And that, when Mark and I got together to come up with the idea, I was like, hey, I have an idea like this, like, wouldn't that be fun? And then he took the idea and, it changed and this and that and the other thing. So next thing you know, we're inviting a third author in, and it's Carl. God help us.
That's over reprobate back on the video. Screw that guy.
but for Diggory, big picture, right? As a writer who makes their living writing, I have the flagship series of AUD, which is, the lion's share of my royalties and income. And I have, 4 or 5 other series floating around and some standalone stuff. And eventually I'm going to run out of AUD. I ran out originally at 8, and I took like a 2-3 year break, wrote a bunch of the other stuff that's out there, and some of it was good and some of it was not. And then eventually when the wind came back into that, those creative sales, I went back and started the second section of AUD, the Adrian's March stuff. Because, I was excited and had come up with a neat way to continue the story and was like compelled and interested enough that I could sit down for, a couple of years and hammer out a storyline. But again, eventually I'm going to run out of gas and I'm going to have told all of the story, or I'll, jump the shark, which many people have said I already have, which is, opinion. But Diggory came out of, thank you, came out of the idea that like, well, let's try around and try and find a new flagship. Let's try and come up with a new series that I can like really lean on and write some, 4 or 5 good books. And I went back and forth with a couple of my friends on ideas, and, I wanted it to be contained and kind of like smaller in scope. I didn't want it to be, traveling the world, and I didn't want to have to invent this entire universe like a fantasy story. And I've always been a really big fan of cosmic horror, the Lovecraftian kind of, unknowable monsters and just evil things that we can't comprehend, and like massive, entities fiddle farting with humanity. And I said, okay, well, maybe I can loop, evil stuff like that in. And then, what kind of stuff do I want it to be? Do I want it to be supernatural? Obviously if there's like monsters, I can do that. And it just kind of grew on itself. And eventually it got to the point where I had Diggory, I had the character. And, it's all about the character, as cool as your setting or your premise is, ultimately people connect with the character. And then what they go through, the people attached to that. And I thought Diggory was, a well-developed enough character idea that people would dig him. And the AUD is written in the journal format, right? Mm-hmm. So you're reading Adrian's journals, and then I have short stories interspersed into the novel to kind of flesh out his world. And the people who like it love it, and then there are some people it just doesn't work for. But that's writing. And I said, well, I want to write more in that style, because the only books I've written that are like that is the Adrian series. So I said, all right, I'm going to do Diggory the same way, a couple tweaks to make it its own thing. And, here I am, 2 books in, and the 2 books are doing pretty well. And, with the series, the more you write in it, the more visibility it gets and the more interest people have and so on. So I'm going to see it through to the end. I'm going to write probably the 5, and hopefully that's another, hook I can hang my hat on.
Well, man, if the next 3 are anything like the first 2, I got a feeling we, the fans, are going to not let you stop at 5.
I have a pretty definitive idea for how I want the series to end. I don't know if there will be a day after, so we'll see.
Okay.
Ominous.
The 2 baddies that you have in the first 2 books, dude, that's imagination right there. That you came up with some stuff that's like, it does what? It's got what in its eyes? What? It's like just the most over-the-top insanity. And anybody that hasn't checked out Diggory yet, maybe because it's new and you want there to be more of them out there, don't wait. Just go get them now. You're not getting left on any cliffhangers. Just go get it. It's great.
Well, that's the monsters are a big part of the cosmic horror kind of Lovecraftian experience, right? Like they're not supposed to be like anything we have here. They're alien. They're from either a different world or a different dimension, or they're literally from hell. Sometimes sometimes you don't. So having the monsters be like very not associatable with something that you've run into is like something you work for. And I sat there for a while. Okay, how can I make this thing weird but functional, and how do I make it uncomfortable for people but also still like make it writable? And it's tough. It is tough.
Well, I gotta say the one with the eyes, I don't want to try to spoil anything, give too much away. That right there, that thing freaks me out, and I don't generally get freaked out by books. Like it's just I'm used to them. I'm hardened to it, you know what I'm saying? And that thing, when you first introduced it and it was doing what it does, it was like, oh, yeah. I do not want to ever encounter anything resembling this. Like
it just wants to love you. That's all.
No, that's all.
It just wants to love you. That's all.
I got my first taste of the Diggory Finch story in the New Worlds anthology you have out.
Yep.
And
okay.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty intriguing. I also have a signed copy. Thank you, by the way.
Oh, you will.
And but yeah, I'm definitely wanting to get into that in the near future. I'm right now trying to catch up on the Carl Meadows Lockie series because I understand there is that the two characters are going to meet up. So I'm like, man, I better read up about this Lockie character before I go much further into AUD because I'm like one or two books down from where you're at right now. So yeah, and I tell you what, I'm already falling in love with Lockie. I mean, she's
great.
She's awesome.
She's great.
I finally got caught up myself with Lockie and then book 13, which I thought was brilliant.
Thank you.
And it really creeped me out. I mean, earlier we've had the devil worming his way into Adrian's camp, but it's a little different this time. It's a little more sinister to me.
Yeah.
The way he's doing is just a little more devious and it's going to cause a lot more destruction. So book 14, please.
Well, part of the problem with that series is, and this is the challenge of it, and sometimes it's awesome and sometimes it's frustrating, is with the post-apocalyptic zombie genre, like carte blanche across the board, there are kind of a set amount of storylines that you can have, right? Like there's the zombie attack, right? There's the traveling from point A to point B during the apocalypse. There's, local survivor group is the bad guys and you have to face off against them. There's like a fairly limited number of, kind of avenues that those stories tend to take. And not going down all of them is tough. And then not doing them again later on is also tough. And I've had to, in a 13-book series, like I've had them go up against, opposing groups like 3 times now. And like, I don't want to write that again. I did that. And, with evil being like a palpable, actual entity that's, moving about and mucking with humanity in the series, doing it in a way where, it's not omniscient. It doesn't have the ability to know everything that's going on. And it's trying to engineer, the failure of mankind is really what it's trying to do. But it has to do it one little bit at a time and like turn, the big gears to get the whole thing to fall. And trying to have that happen in different ways is really tough. It's like really, really tough.
One thing I like
about, go ahead.
Yeah. One thing I liked about in the Adrian's Undead Diary series is, instead of the cause of the apocalypse being some kind of a virus or a vaccine gone wrong, or somebody eats a bat poisoned by a lab in China somewhere, like that that shit's ever going to happen, But you went the supernatural route for the cause of the outbreak, which kind of inspired me to kind of keep mine supernatural when I wrote my first book.
It's fun. It's a fun way to do it. It takes the handcuffs off you in so many ways because the supernatural is not defined, right? So if you want to like tweak your storyline or move in a different direction, like you have given yourself permission to get really weird. Jeff just commented you have to up the stakes, and you do. It's tough, but having the supernatural sort of like fuel for what's going on, like it just gives you the freedom to do whatever. That being said, I like the virus stories. I like all the different kind of origins. Those are all great and entertaining in their own way. But when I started to write it, I was like, I don't want it to be just a virus. Like, I don't want it to just be that. I want it to be about bigger things than just survival. And I knew if I brought in this like morality play and like, it's not enough just to survive, it's how you survive.
Right.
That like completely changes things, right? Because you could just go on a murderous rampage and kill everybody and be like, all right, only my people are done. I win. Give me all the bread, canned bread. But I didn't want that, right? Like I wanted to have morality really matter. So
good choice. It was.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
it was a risk.
That was one of the things that I loved about, say, Zombie Fallout was, Mark kind of used the infection angle, but then you get bulkers and speeders and just all these different variations of your typical zombie. So it was fresh. You know, when I first read Zombie Fallout, where I got my start and all this, it was that got me. It was the fact this isn't like Return of the Living Dead, Night of the Living Dead. This thing is different, and that's the same thing you get with Adrian's Undead Diary. It's you've not read this. It's not out there, you know. And if it is out there, it was plagiarized. It's not out there. So we can be better was the theme I took when I first found AUD.
And that is a huge core defining idea. That like part of the reason why we're in the trouble we're in is because we just have not lived up to our potential as a species, as a society. Like we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not taking care of our neighbors, we're not taking care of the world. We're just not doing it, you know. And you know, you can read all the political subtext you want into that. That's not what it's about. It's about just us trying to be better people, you know. And you know, the people who are not trying to survive while also being a better person, it doesn't matter if they survive. So it just gives you more meat to play with. You know, there's more at stake than just living or dying.
I agree 100%. Yep.
Well, let me ask you, let's go back to Bleed.
Yeah.
How was it working with Mark? I mean, did that one just kind of flow nice and easy, or did you guys spend a lot of time having to go back and forth figuring out what you're going to do?
Well, Mark and I, we've been buddies for, God, probably a decade now. And we've always had a good, you know, I would say friendship. And he lives in Maine, which is only about, I think he probably lives about 4 hours from me now, maybe 3.5 hours. And, you know, we met a few times just for, you know, poops and chuckles halfway, and just like sat down and had some beers and BS'd. And then he came down to a convention here and stayed the weekend and just hit it off. Like he and I are just very compatible people. And we had been tossing around the idea of writing something from the first time we met. Like 2 hours into hanging out, he was like, we got to do something. Like, I think we could write something and it would be fun. I was like, yeah, no, let's do it. And then, you know, he's super busy. I'm busy. And, you know, like a year went by or whatever. And we hooked up again for, you know, an afternoon of beers. And he had an idea and was like, well, what about, you know, something like this? And I was like, you know, actually, I wrote this short story that, you know, could feed into that. And, you know, I gave him the spiel of the short story and he's like, oh, that's cool. And like, what if we did this and what if we did that? And he and I had like 70% of the outline for the series, just kind of like on a page of notes. And Mark was like, hey, we should get a third. Like we should get a third to do this, because it'll bring in another name. And, you know, he has a list of people that he's always wanted to work with. And we narrowed it down to like 4 or 5 people. And David Moody was at the top of the list. And we sent out feelers to the top 3 all at the same time and was like, hey, we're thinking of doing a project like this. Are any of you interested in you know, jumping in? And David was available and he was at the top of the list. So it just worked out perfect. And as far as working with them, is it easy? Well, I mean, Mark and I are both very creative in a collaborative sense. So, you know, we can sit in a room and spitball and brainstorm, and it just gets better the more we talk, you know? So we play off of each other really well. And David has a very distinct voice and was happy to put in his 2 cents to like pick apart where our ideas had holes and basically be like, hey, that's great, but have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? And we had a rough plan for how we were going to hand the work back and forth. And we had a list of core characters that belonged to us. And then in the first book, when we wrote it, Rupture, we kind of kept to our own characters. So we each wrote our independent storylines that kind of merged at the end of book 1, so we could like develop the voice and really, you know, flesh out the characters. And then starting in book 2, it just went batshit. Like we just started handing people off and using each other's, you know, chapters, and we wrote it in thirds, basically coming to the, you know, to the end. Like, okay, you write the first third of the book, you write the second third, I'll write the, you know, the last third or whatever it was. And then, you know, went back and forth and tweaked and stuff. So Mark would always edit the sections that had his characters in it to make sure that I used dialogue that matched, and David would always edit the stuff that Mark wrote that had his characters, and it was just really easy. Like, honestly, like both of them are really easygoing guys, and we're really flexible, and we really just wanted to have fun with it. And the story is bonkers. Like, I don't know if you guys have read it or listened to it, but it is wild. Like, they travel all over the multiverse. There's a fantasy world. There's modern day England. There's a colony on the moon in the future, and they don't. That's not just where they stay. They go all over the place. They wind up going to like all these kinds of alien worlds and machine planets and stuff. And it was just fun, like, let's just get together and write this crazy story and like not worry about limits, and we don't have to care about continuity, and who gives a shit if Adrian's in it, like we just went crazy with it, and it's just fun, and people seem to like it. So
it's on my list.
Is Adrian in it?
No.
No. I thought you were giving something away there. Dang.
No. Mark slipped some stuff in from his series. There's a couple of characters that are very clearly crossed over, which, that's his thing. He does that. He brings in everybody into his like core narrative, which is really fun for his people, his fans. So
I'm
nice.
Can't help it. Now, I want to get to one that I haven't gotten into the second book yet. Again, list a mile long these days. But Tesser, you killed it with that, man. Have you always had an obsession with dragons?
Yeah. I'm an old school.
It showed, man.
Yeah. I've been doing either miniatures games or role-playing games since like 1990. And, if you play Dungeons and Dragons, there are dragons. Not all the time, but enough. And Tesser grew out of an old campaign. It wasn't a D&D campaign, but it was a role-playing campaign. And we didn't finish it, the campaign. We played like, gosh, I don't know, maybe 10 times and didn't get to finish the storyline. This is back in like 1999 or something like that. And then after AUD had wrapped, I was like, I want to write something that's modern day. I want to write some kind of cool, urban fantasy kind of thing where there's like guns and magic. And I thought back to that campaign and was like, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if the main character was a dragon? And then like, okay, how do I build that world? And the way my brain works is once I have an idea that excites me, that I need to develop it. Like I have to stop what I'm doing and I have to vomit all the ideas out on paper or in a document and get it all organized and sort of like collect all my thoughts. And even if I don't do anything with it after that, I at least got it out. And then it lives outside of my head and it doesn't have to take up space anymore. And then, I kept going back to it and adding and developing and adding and developing. And the next thing I know, I was like, man, I already have like the outline for 9 chapters of this book. All right, I'm going to write it. So, now 5 books later, it does well. It's a fun series.
Now, does it end at book 5 or do you have plans to do anything else with it?
People have asked, and the answer is it's kind of complicated. So I had the same narrator for the first 2 books, and then he left, who was the original narrator for Adrian's, who also left that series. And we switched over to a different narrator, and he's good, but he's nothing like the first narrator. And I would say probably 60 or 70% of all the books I sell are audio. So when I think about writing a book, I am primarily thinking about what it will sound like as an audiobook. And Audible Studios bought the rights to the first 5 novels in the series and did not buy any more. So when I wrote the 5th novel and satisfied, my contract with them, I didn't have a contract to write more. And by then I was on to other things and had kind of like expended the majority of the ideas that I had for that universe at the time. And now here I am several years later. If I were to go back, I would have to go back to Audible and give them the right of first refusal for the audio rights. Or I would have to, assuming they passed, I would have to go back to them and hire another narrator. And maybe I could hire the guy that did the second 3. I wouldn't hire the guy who did the first 2. And then it's like, well, now it just keeps getting more and more complicated. But that being said, I have ideas for at least 2, maybe 3 more in that series.
Sweet.
But, I've got a couple of other things going on that have taken up more space in my head. But eventually it would be really fun to go back to it because I have a couple of really cool, like really fun and exciting kind of adventure, stories that could happen in that series.
Yeah, because right now I've got. Sorry. So go ahead, Rich.
I was going to say, what's the whole thing about Audible Studios? I've heard of Podium Publishing, but Audible Studios. How does one get in with that? I mean, as long as you meet the right criteria, you can get on Audible with your audio book. But what's the whole Audible Studios thing? What is that?
So there's the ACX platform, which is the independent publishing wing of Audible. And then Audible itself is the company that distributes all of those audiobooks to all the different platforms and advertises it and manages the website and the app and all that jazz. And they're a division of Amazon. And then within Audible, the company, there is a publishing and production internal section called Audible Studios. And Audible Studios is responsible for the Audible Originals line, which if you're an Audible subscriber, you'll get dings all the time that, something came out, Audible Original. And Audible Studios is responsible for making those. They, foot the bill, they bring in the cast, the actors, they hire the writers to do all that. It's basically like their own production wing. And they also produce and publish audiobooks from authors that they, want to work with on a more intimate basis. That's not the right word. But there are some authors that they don't want to let them do everything independently. They would rather bring you in and be like, hey, look, we love what you do. The indie thing is working for you, but if you come here, we can do some more stuff for you and whatever. And they work just like a company like Podium or Brilliance or Tantor, but they're just a part of Audible.
That's something that you put in for you, kind of like where you put out a what's the word?
You just apply, like put in an application.
you query them. Well, no, I got my very first Audible Studios contract when I had a literary agent. 5-6 years ago. He, as an agent, just pitches publishers and has meetings and tries to sell your stuff. And because I had so much success with AUD, when he pitched them the other titles that I had worked on or had in process, they were interested. Because they, again, I was having a lot of success as an indie, and they wanted to kind of like bring me in and give me other opportunities. So the first contract with them came from him, and then the second contract that I got, I did myself after I let him go, and then I haven't sold anything else to them since then. Indie, you make more money generally as an indie, and per unit sold. And as long as you have an audience, that you have like a reasonable feeling that like, all right, I'm going to sell enough of these that, I'll be okay if I produce it indie, then, you can go indie. The neat thing about Audible is if they're willing to take a risk on something you're not sure about, they do so much marketing, like so much marketing for you. And that's when you can like kind of hook in, a little bit of help on something that you're a little leery of. But,
now, you're telling me you've had stuff you've released that you were leery of? Come on.
Oh yeah, everything new. Every book I write, I don't quite know how it's going to be taken. I have a approximate feeling, when I get close to release, when I have like the big picture of the book written and in hand, I usually can be like, all right, this is good. Like this is going to be a good one. And with the core series with AUD stuff, it's way more predictable, right? Because I'm 13 books in. I know how many books of book 12 I sold, and I can reasonably expect to sell the same amount. So that'll be a success, quote unquote. But like when I go off that path, when I do something that's not, my flagship, I don't know. People don't always follow. So it's a risk.
Well,
like our comment here. Now I'm probably going to butcher his name, so I apologize ahead of time. Sylvester Barzy.
yep, Barzy.
Yep.
Barzy.
It's always a gamble, and that is
It is.
It's always a gamble.
It is.
And flashing back to if I can get it to come back up here, where'd it go? Back to Anthony Castro's comment. He said, "Would love to see your series in comic book form."
Mm.
That would be $1 million idea, because I know I would damn sure subscribe to it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's comics is a passion. Just showing my flying my geek flag here. The issue is finding a reliable artist that you can team up with in a way that financially makes sense for everybody is really hard. And the time that it takes to put together a comic book is pretty extensive. If I were to write a fresh comic book script, most comic book scripts are like 20 to 25 pages long. And it's not filled with words like it is a book, but you also have to write art direction in there, right? So, you write the dialogue, and then you have like a couple sentences where you tell the artist what the box should look like. Then you move to the next one, It's just a different kind of storytelling. And the idea of trying to sit down and bust out like 5 comic book scripts, which, a 25-page document is like 3 or 4 days of work at a minimum for me.
Wow.
That's like a month or two to write out a comic book series. And I don't get paid for that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not getting paid by the comic book publisher to do that. And I've put out tons of feelers to people in the industry that have connections. And I have some people who are like circling, but nothing substantial has happened. And then, you can do it the indie route again, going through Kickstarter and hiring people, through Fiverr or whatever. And sometimes that's very successful, and sometimes it's not. And, it's tough to take a month of work unpaid.
Oh yeah.
On a gamble. And then, when you're talking about comic books, you're also talking about like, well, how the hell am I going to distribute it? Right? Like, let's say I write a 24-page comic book. I find someone to illustrate all 24 pages. I get the covers. I go to Kickstarter. It successfully kickstarts, and we sell, let's say 1,000 copies. Well, then what? Well, do I ship out all 1,000 copies? Like, do I handle that? Do I sign them? So then I have to have them shipped to me, and then I have to have comic boards and sleeves and then mailers to put them in, and then I'm dealing with 1,000 packages to the post office.
Very expensive.
So exactly. And then logistically it becomes this whole other monster, so comic books they're like treacherous ground, and the geek in me is like, I want to do a comic book. Like, all I've ever wanted to do with my life is write a comic book. But then like the business person in me who's been a writer for 10 years is like, oh, okay. That's a great dream, but the reality is like there's a ton of work that goes into it, bro. But yeah, I mean, eventually it'll happen eventually. I just don't know how or when or exactly, how.
Okay.
Is that the same way? I'm sorry, Jack.
I'm thinking the way this is going to work, Marvel Comics is going to come to you with a blank check and go, let's do Adrian's Undead Diary. And we're just going to go from there. I'll keep it simple. And yes,
Great.
I am partial to
cool.
Marvel. I don't want DC to get their hands on it, even unless they're paying you a bunch of money. Yeah, I was going to say.
There are a lot of really great indie imprints that make great comics and work with great illustrators who have big distribution. And so much of a comic book's success comes from the people who verbally talk about liking it, nowadays. Marvel and DC and Image and Dark Horse, they have the shelf space now, right? They're the 500-pound gorilla in the room. And they can put out any comic they want, and it's going to go into stores, and retailers are going to buy, 10,000 copies of it no matter what. But, the little indies, they make 500 copies, 1,000 copies, and then send like 3 to a store. And, you build up word of mouth through that, and people read it and like it and then talk about it online. And then, when you get to the second printing, you go from, 500, say, to 2,500. And, you build up that way. So, I would be thrilled to work with one of the smaller indie comic companies. because they're publishers just like any other, and they have way more ability to handle the logistics than I do.
So
I don't have a warehouse, right? So if a pallet of comic books shows up at my house, like what
that can be
where are you gonna put them?
Like, hey, honey, I got to sleep on the floor. So.
And so Anthony Castro says that you've been a great help in the process of getting his comic done.
Yeah, it's been a fun process. Anthony's got his avatar there, the rabbit. He's got an idea for a futuristic dystopian world that's been repopulated by like anthropomorphic creatures, and it's a fun story, and it's a story of redemption. This character, Bad Wabbit, is like he's an alcoholic. He's a bouncer at a bar, and just gets wrapped up in this huge debacle of trying to help people that aren't really his friends, but they become his friends. And Anthony needed a little bit of help with editing and story stuff, and I hopped in to give him a hand. And it's been fun.
Cool.
DC to the death of me. Yeah. I just can't get down with DC. Even though I'm holding a Superman mug.
You're a traitor.
I know. It was a gift. What am I going to do?
Chris, when you're writing for games, or when you used to write for games, I guess, was it the same thing? You didn't get paid to write that right away? Or was that like, hey, we got a game, we need you to write the story, create the world, and we'll pay you this much?
Well, it's a fun story. I've told it a few times, but I used to work for a company called WizKids, and they primarily put out, at the time, they put out miniatures games. And they had one game when I first started working for them, Mage Knight, and it was the original clicks-based games. I don't know if you guys ever did any tabletop stuff, but all of the stats for every model in the game was on the base, and you just twisted the base to tell you, what was going on, which was revolutionary at the time. But I was working for them, and I started out as a playtester, and then got brought on as like a, I guess you'd call it a developer position. And then wound up being a rules arbitrator, which basically meant that I took an existing product line and was responsible for managing the rules for it.
Okay.
And making sure that models in the game were fair, and any updates to the rules were all, kind of double checked and verified and whatnot. And one day, they put out the call, via a company-wide email, basically saying, hey, we have need for some short fiction to, slide into, a rule book here, or we want to put some up on the web to give our website more meat. And if everybody wants to send us in a 250 word short story, feel free to send it in. And I had already, for fun, been writing in the game's universe, fan fiction. And I just went back and basically took some of the stuff that I wrote, and then I wrote a couple other short ones, and I just sent them off to the person in the company who was responsible for editing it and making the choice. I think his name was Scott. And he wrote me back the next morning, was like, dude, we can use 4 of these. That's awesome. Thank you. And because that wasn't part of my job description, they had to buy the rights from me. And I got paid, a nickel a word or whatever it was, on top of my regular pay to write this stuff, which to me was mind blowing. Yeah. Somebody was going to pay me, $13 for a short story I wrote a year ago. What? Holy crap. But then it just became a thing. Every time they had a need for it, I'd get an email, and he'd be like, hey, do you think you could bust out, 500 words on this, 250 words on that, and 1,000 words on this? And I'd be like, sure, I'll try. And I worked for them for 3 years and did writing for probably a year and a half or 2 years of it. And got paid. They paid me to do it. And then the company got bought out, and I got laid off, and, eventually got the writing itch again. And that's when I started to try to write a novel.
Yeah, it's the cosmos was just moving you to where you needed to go.
Hey, to me, I'm getting ready to retire here and going on terminal at the end of this month. Can't wait. But
good for you.
So I'm going to have a lot more time to focus on my writing. But I'm also kind of still looking for something, a job on the side there to, pay a house off early or whatever, but that to me, that would be a dream job, to get a job with somewhere like Naughty Dog or one of the other big companies and just write stories for a living, for games, whatever. That would just be that'd be a hellacious gig if you ask me. But,
that would be great. I would love to do something like that. That would be a lot of fun. It's pretty rarefied air, like there aren't a lot of those gigs out there. Because like how many games come out every year, really?
Right.
And how many of them actually have like decent storyline, So, but it would be great. I would love to do that.
Yeah.
All right. I got another question. I did some digging around, and of course it was just this morning, so I could have dug farther, but I ran across something in your bio that just keeps sticking in my brain. And every time I look down at my little cheat sheet, it's right there. You said you have 2 perfect daughters. What the hell is a perfect daughter?
They're just awesome. They're fun. They're smart. They're cute. They're kind. They have great interests. They're funny. They're great. They're just awesome kids.
Okay.
They're also a nightmare, but that's the way kids work.
Well, yeah, I had 2 daughters. It's pretty much the same. But when you had the first perfect daughter, what drove you to go for number 2? Was it vanity, or did you think you could do even higher, even better?
It was the knife my wife held to my throat. That was
donate or else.
Very persuasive. No, we when I first met Leah, my wife, we both wanted kids. We had both been divorced. We both wanted to be in a relationship where kids were, part of the plan. And she said she wanted to have 4 boys. And I was like, no. Like 4 is just too much. Like, I don't know how we would financially manage it, let alone psychologically manage it. And I don't care if at the time I didn't care if I had a boy or girl. But we did say that we didn't want to stop at 1. We wanted our kids to have, brothers and sisters. So we had 1, knowing that eventually we would at least try for 2. And, 2 years after we had our first Willow, we successfully conceived Juniper. And once we had 2, it was like, all right, that's cool. Like, that's
right.
like
I was the same way. My daughters were born, and I'm like, okay, I'm done, but I'm so happy we have them. By the way, I'm the oldest of 4 boys. My mom would have told you exactly why not to do 4 boys.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, my daughter, she is as perfect as me, and we'll leave it at that.
Almost let that one slip on you. Jack, no audio. No, not yet, buddy.
Like a Muppet. Mama.
I just want to stick my hand up there, make him talk.
Mama.
No, nothing yet. While he's playing with this audio, what's the benefit of changing your writer name? Because I noticed you're not just Chris Philbrook. You're also, what was it? W.L. Orion? Or W.J. Orion?
W.J. Orion, yeah. So the stuff that's under the W.J. pen name is young adult.
Yeah.
So it's very different than my core adult level stuff. And when I was coming up with the idea for the story, and knowing that I wanted to write something that was for a younger age market, and I started to look into like diversification and pen names and like what makes sense and like how to promote, the thing that kept coming up over and over is, and frankly it terrified me, was like, what if I wrote a young adult book as Chris Philbrook, put it out, a parent buys it for their 10-year-old kid loves it and says, hey, I want more stuff by Chris Philbrook, and then the dad windmill slams down Adrian's, thinking that it's going to be suitable for a 10-year-old, and it really isn't. It's just not.
That didn't
12
even occur to me.
Maybe 14 probably, but it became a really sensible idea to have the 2 like kind of avenues of approach be different names, and then I could promote the WJ stuff through my Chris Philbrook channels, and all of my Chris Philbrook followers would say, oh, he wrote that's just his young adult pen name. But anybody finding the young adult pen name first would
get a shock.
at least be contained enough to know that they shouldn't just jump over. And that was the plan.
Okay, I should have thought that through before I asked. It was pretty common sense.
Well, I mean, it's the kind of stuff that you don't think of. I didn't think of it, until I started to do the research on it, and I was like, oh, actually, I really need to think about this.
Jack, you still don't have any audio. Move your mouth and I'll talk for you.
Are you plugged in?
and I'm sure he's going to have a lot of curse words.
Probably. He's got a deep well of those.
See, right now he's like, this fucking plug.
All right. It's very small.
He's
put
used
it in.
to that.
Put it in the hole.
Yeah.
You can find that hole, right?
He probably thinks he's in it.
Just flopping around like a hot dog down a hallway.
Who are you gonna call? Tech support? Jesus,
Oh my
Jack.
God.
This happens with Jack all the time. I hate to air his dirty laundry, but
Oh, day drinking.
Everybody knows his dirty laundry anyway. We should just fill the rest of this podcast, base it on him. Okay, Chris, I read that you do paintings. Anything that we may have seen, or have you done your own book cover, or do you always hire out for that?
God, no.
Some hair around it.
Again,
find it.
I'm a gamer.
Right.
So I do a lot of tabletop miniatures games. Yeah. It's okay. We
Go
still
ahead.
love you. This is actually easier with less. So I do a lot of miniatures games where you play an army versus an army or whatever, and most of those models are supplied unpainted. So one of my numerous and extensive hobbies is painting the little miniature figures. So
I never could get into that, but I love building like the horror model kits, and then I'll spend a whole week just airbrushing colors and
yeah.
Even if nobody else likes it, I'm like, wow, I painted that. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's
but I can't. Go ahead.
It's cathartic. It's very therapeutic and
it is.
And you sit down and you're these little minutiae, and that you drown out all the other things and just focus on making this one thing right. And at the end, you have something to show. And when I play with my friends and we gather together and we put all our guys on the table to have a game, everybody looks around and is like, oh, that looks great. Can I look at it? And you get to have that moment of geeky accomplishment where somebody validates the work you did, and that's just a lot of fun.
And Jack showed off some of the dice that you made for him.
Yeah.
I like you as a mute, Jack. I've seen some of these guys that paint these little figures, and they're amazing. I'm like, I can't even figure out how you got the eyeballs. You ever see some of those guys that get that detail?
Instagram has some accounts of people who are utterly astonishing talented.
Yeah.
And when I want to go make myself feel bad about the level of skill I have, I just go to Instagram, and I do okay. Most of the time people pick up the stuff that I've painted and they're like, oh, that looks really nice. And sometimes I paint something and it really comes out nice for whatever reason. And, that feels really good when I look at it. But then I look at some of those people and it's like, you're on a whole different level.
I'm still at Play-Doh level.
Yeah. You're building skyscrapers. I just made a teepee leaning against a birch tree.
And it's crooked at that.
Right.
Speaking of artistic stuff, do you have, any specific artist that does your cover art, or how do you go about accomplishing that for your books?
So the majority of my covers have been done by a guy named Alan McGraffin. Alan was a high school friend of mine who went to art school and became an illustrator, and has had some success as a graphic designer and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why I took the leap in indie publishing was because Alan was willing to help me with the graphics side of it, helping with the layout of the books, making sure they look, decent in printed form. And he was able to do cover art. And because I've known him for 20 years and I know his art style and his ability to, hear what I'm saying and then actually make that appear, I've been working with him since day one. but he hasn't done all of my covers. I had a couple done by Ian Lannis, who's a now he's a concept artist and he works on like anime. he has departed the world of book cover art and no longer offers that service, and like basically just does concept art for TV shows. He's super talented. And then the other guy that I'm working with is Jeremy Flagg, who he's an author under Jeremy Flagg, but his profession is graphic arts. And Jeremy is doing the Diggory series for me. He's done the 2 covers of book 1 and book 2. And then we have covers kind of in process for 3, 4, and 5. And Alan and Jeremy are both very different styles of artists. They do very different work. So it's kind of neat to go back and forth and get different art. And I'm not opposed to working with other people, but I'm a trust guy. So if I'm going to like trust, the success of a book on its cover, I at least want to work with someone that I know is going to follow through. And I have relationships with those guys going back years. So.
Okay.
Nice.
I tell you what, I just got a message from, I heard a new cover artist for my 3rd book coming out, Dead Cold War.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I've got it. I'm going to be sharing it with you guys.
Yay.
When we're done. It's pretty cool so far. I've just got the first draft, and holy crap. It's going to be something way different than the cartoony ones that I've had in the previous 2 books. I may have him go back and redo the first 2 even.
Those kind of had a charm to them, though, Richard.
Yeah.
Well, Jack, I think we can hear you.
Oh, really? Can you hear me?
Shit, he's back.
Turn it off.
Finally.
One of the cool things about alternate art, right, is you can have like an original cover release, like 1st edition, and then have your widespread release be the cover you prefer, right? So you could just put it out like, hey, I'm gonna pull this cover in 3 weeks and put up a new one. So if you want this cover, buy it now, and give people the opportunity. So.
No, that's a good idea.
Well, see, I'm going to tell you now, Richard's cover for Wild-Eyed Southern Boys, book 1, that thing's going to be worth millions once he has those all redone and he becomes super famous and he's like all out there with the Bigfoot tails. It's going to be epic, and I have one, so haha.
Bigfoots have tails?
They could.
No, I didn't think so.
No.
You stumped him. He just went blank. He's like, what? Tails?
Wait, what?
Okay.
I'm going to go hang out with Chris now, you guys.
Play on words. It's a play on words.
All right. Well, we're coming up towards the end of the show, and we usually reserve this part to tell everybody where you can find us. And,
Richard, since you're going, tell us, buddy, where can everybody find you?
Okay. Well, you can find me on my website, richardrrose.com, and on my Facebook page, Richard R. Rose Author. You can find my stuff on Amazon and Audible and iTunes. And gosh, I'm fucking brain fart. Yeah. Wild-Eyed Southern Boys, Dead Cold War is coming out really soon. I'm almost done with the book. Got to go back and do the edits, and I'll be launching a cover art reveal pretty soon once it's finalized, and real excited about that. Holy crap.
Yay.
We are too.
All right. But you'll also see me at the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Festival coming up in May in none other than Townsend, Tennessee. And you'll also see Jack the Bear Bear in there again. We'll be returning by popular demand. So it's going to be a good time. So, if you want to be there, come on down. And if you've already bought a book, bring it with you. I'll sign it for free. Look.
Nice. Yeah, this will be the Bigfoot Festival where I actually do get shot by a fan.
Yeah.
They already if they've read the book by the time we get to this Bigfoot Festival, they're probably going to shoot me. So, just putting that out there.
Just to throw this out here, also, Jack is a major villain in this book, and he's also on the cover for the cover art. So,
does the character speak throughout the book, or is it mute?
Is he what now? No. He actually speaks. He speaks way too much, actually.
You just got slammed from Chris Philbrook.
I can die a happy man.
What?
I said I can die a happy man. Oh, shut
No
up.
audio. We can't hear you again.
Yeah.
What?
All righty, Chris.
All right.
Only because we love you.
Yeah.
I don't shit on people I don't like.
That's a good thing.
If I'm being really nice to you,
I thought I felt a toe on my head there for a second. You know, get squeezed down that drain.
All right.
Carry on, Richard.
All right, Chris. Where can we find you?
well, if I'm out on bail, you can usually find me online. You can just pop my name into any search engine, Chris Philbrook with a PH. And then most of my social handles are just at Philbrook Author. And you know, if you just drop that into Google, it'll bring you to whatever avenue you want to try and talk to me. So,
all right,
make it easy.
Literally just Google him, and he even pops up in Pornhub.
I got to support this endeavor somehow, man. I'm not the March of Dimes. Like, I don't have donations flowing in.
Hey,
Carl has made a request without making a request. So damn it, I'm not going to let the man down.
okay,
Look here,
go
you bloody agent of hell! Get off my freaking back! I'm
God.
over here trying to do the bloody best I can, mate.
A little Australian, but it's okay. It's not bad.
Yeah, it's a little something.
Yeah, they all talk funny, no matter where they are. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a great show. Chris, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Of course, yeah, it's always fun.
Yeah, so
Hope you'll come back.
Yeah,
Let me know.
Yeah.
As long as I have advance notice, I can plug it into the calendar.
Hell yeah!
Thank you for coming to the Written Undead podcast. I'm Richard R. Rose, along with Jack Childress.
Wrong way that way.
Okay, but
I got the same problem. I can never figure it out. Oh wait, for me, he's up above.
and Uebel and Chris Philbrook. This is the
See ya.
Written Undead podcast. See you later.
Take care.
Bye.
Peace.